Assalamu alaikum. I'm Khadija from BDS first year studying in Frontier Medical and Dental College, and my topic is temporomandibular joint. What is temporomandibular joint? They are the two joints connecting the jawbone to the skull. It is a bilateral synovial articulation between the temporal bone of the skull above and below. Or we can say it is the relationship between the bones of the upper and lower jaws and is maintained by the articulation of the condylar process of the mandible with the glenoid fossa of the temporal bone. In very simple words, the TMJ is joint between the mandible and the temporal bone of the skull. Now, we use the word condylar process and glenoid fossa. What are they? The condyloid or the condylar process is the process on the human mandible. It is thicker than the glenoid process of the mandible. It consists of two portions, the condyle and the constricted portion which supports the neck. As you can see in the picture, it is marked in red. Glenoid fossa. The mandibular fossa is an oval depression behind the anterior root of the zygomatic process of temporal bone for the reception of the condyle of the mandible. Fossa itself means a shallow depression on a bone into which another bone fits to form a joint. Now, the formation. The TMJ cavity is formed by a fibrous capsule lined with a synovial membrane and is separated into compartments by an extension of capsule to form a specialized movable disc. The articular surfaces of the bone are not covered by hyaline cartilage but a fibrous layer that is a continuation of the periosteum covering the individual bones. Periosteum is a dense layer of vascular tissue enveloping the bones except at the surfaces of the joint. The periosteum that lines the articular surfaces gradually is transformed during its early development into dense fibrous articular tissue of TMJ. Way to understand the function of TMJ is to consider it as a joint, with the articular disc being a movable articular surface. Now in this picture, you can see the mandibular fossa of temporal bone, mandibular joint, and the mandibular notch. Now the main structure, the main components of the TMJ are the joint capsule, second the articular disc, third, mandibular condyles, we have discussed it, articular surfaces of the temporal bone, temporomandibular ligament. It has for the two types, the stylomandibular ligament and the sphenomandibular ligament, and lateral trigoid muscle. First, the joint capsule. The capsule is a dense fibrous membrane that surrounds the joint and incorporates the articular eminence. Articular eminence is the bony eminence on temporal bone in the skull. It attaches to articular eminence, the articular disc, and the neck of the mandibular condyle. In the picture, you can appreciate the capsule. The articular disc, it is a unique feature of temporomandibular joint. The disc is composed of dense fibrocartilaginous tissue that is positioned between the head of the mandibular condyle and the glenoid fossa of the temporal bone. Now in this picture, it is visible the articular disc, the articular eminence, and the articular fossa. Next is the temporomandibular ligament. The temporomandibular ligament is the thickened lateral portion of the capsule. It has two parts, an outer oblique portion and an inner horizontal portion. It has further two types, stylomandibular ligament and sphenomandibular ligament. Stylomandibular ligament, it runs from the styloid process to the angle of mandible, and sphenomandibular ligament, it runs from the spine of the sphenoid bone to the lingula of the mandible. You can appreciate in the picture the stylomandibular ligament and the sphenomandibular ligament. Now the next part is the lateral trigoid muscle. This is a small thick muscle located on each side of skull that assists with mastication. Function of TMJ. The temporomandibular joint is the synovial joint with special features that permit the complex movement associated with mastication. This system plays a role in breathing, eating, and speech. Thank you.